And then when you get into here, it's like a 4 or something like that. And why is everything green? Oh my God. Oh, The Matrix. Oh, fuck Keanu. That movie was horrible. So Pawn, back on The Matrix, anything trans-related at all in the movie? There wasn't anything related in that movie, no. Like, they in the movie make a joke about the movie being about the original movies being trans-related. That's the closest that you get. The entire movie is about Keanu Reeves' face. Look how Keanu looks these days. And he's handsome for a man at 58 or whatever the fuck he is. Like, he's got some new freckles, you know what I'm saying? Like, the old man freckles are starting to come in. But he's fun to look at. I acknowledge that. I don't know if we needed to spend $200 million on a 2.5-hour film because Keanu Reeves, his freckles are cute. I don't know if that was a thing we needed to do. You know, another movie that I saw last year, I can say last year now because it's 2022. Last year I saw Free Guy. Did you guys see Free Guy? It's a fucking killer movie. You know, number one had fucking blood death stroke man. Bloody death. What's his name? Owen Wilson. It's not. At the bottom of Free Guy, there's a bubbling, like, just teeming sort of primordial goo of the philosophy of individuality, of sentience, of existence itself. Who am I? What is this? What is this world that I'm born into? Do I matter? All of that is bubbling underneath it, and then on top of it, they make this beautiful, fun, summer action movie. And it has a meaning and a point to exist. These are all qualities I describe specifically so that I can then say the new Matrix movie has nothing bubbling underneath it and has no reason to exist, except that Keanu's freckles might be perceived as cute. And I know, like, having seen this movie, I know that they are absolutely planning on building a fucking franchise and another, like, trilogy out of it and everything like that. If there is a God, lowercase g, uppercase G, you should not allow them to make a movie off of this movie. Because this movie did nothing. It accomplished nothing. It had nothing to say. There was no reason for these images to flash before my eyes and these sounds to be there. There were never any stakes. There were stakes presented, and then those stakes meant nothing, which means that there were no stakes. There were no real stakes, but they were setting up stakes for later movies that might come in the trilogy where maybe the stakes will become relevant at that point, which means that this movie has no reason to exist. Io is the new city that they show us. Let me tell you about this city, all right? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to spoil everything for you. I'm going to tell you about the city. Our entire exposure to the city of Io occurs across like 5 or 6 fucking sets. 4 of them exist in basically a tower where the governor of Io lives. That's it. That's our exposure to the city. We never get a sense that the city is alive, that people live here, that things are going on. The second and the third film, they invoke that there's these cities that exist outside the Matrix, and then they show you people that live in them, and little children who are running around trying to play in them, and wars that are breaking out, and people who are running through. There's a population for these cities. It makes the city be alive. It makes it worth something. It makes the city its own character. It makes the city matter. That if something happens here, people are affected. They don't bother doing that in this film. We see maybe like a dozen people, 8 of which are, you know, pilots of ships for the Matrix peoples. One of them's the governor, and then one of them's fucking Neo, and that's it. That's the population of this fucking city. Oh, and there's a couple of like CGI animated people that are made of balls. They're literally made of balls. I'm not saying, it's not a criticism. They are made of balls. Tiny balls too. No joy juice in them. And the whole reason why we're at Io for basically the entire second act of this 2.5-hour movie, so 1/3 of the fucking movie, is that just Neo being awake again is a threat in and of itself to Io, right? Because Io is a city that the humans have, and they've managed to build it to the point where they can like survive and maybe even enjoy some of their lives, which in the previous 2 movies we just saw people having sex raves because there was absolutely nothing. They were going to die 30 seconds from now as far as everybody knew. So in a cave, we'll just have unprotected sex all night. In this one, Io has been around long enough that it's managed to find some stability, get some technology. They're starting to be able to grow like food on the version of Earth that doesn't have an atmosphere anymore because they burned it off or whatever. The city of Io is comfort, that people have escaped from the Matrix and they're living in Io, and Io has become a place of comfort, and so maybe their priorities aren't so much to free everybody else from the Matrix anymore, but to, I don't know, live a fulfilling life, instead of being at constant war all of the time with the robots, who are definitely more powerful than they are, which is very reasonable, which in part undermines this whole concept that Io presents in the entire fucking second act of the movie. And then we leave, and then the entire third act occurs, and then credits roll, and Io didn't matter at all. The worries, the concerns that we took an entire act of this film to set up do not come back. They don't come back. No. Why were you even worried? No. Now I need to see these movies. See, by spoiling them, I'm making them more interesting than they are. I'm doing a bad work here. Make sure if you do see this movie, you do not pay them for it. Make sure that you pirate it in some way. The first act is 80% them ripping off scenes from the original Matrix. Well, they actually show you scenes from the original Matrix trilogy, behind the things as they're ripping them off, and as they're pointing at them and making fun of them, they're being self-referential, they're self-aware. This is the writers writing their own perspectives of the stress and the difficulty and having to deal with these big corporate outfits who are giving you the money in order to write a Matrix film, when Matrix films were like a big thing, and the original Matrix is like a jumping off point for a whole lot of fucking cinema, and now we have to write a new thing. And so what they did was they decided to put their own anxieties, fears, concerns, and professional difficulties on the page of the script, and then perform that script for the first 40 minutes of the film in the year 2021, which is when this released, where, it's not as though there's some heavy shit that we have to deal with in the real world, and maybe it would be nice to just escape to something else and project ourselves into something else. No, what I want to do is walk into a film and watch somebody else project about their stresses and difficulties in life. And by the way, in the original Matrix movies, there's if you're gonna steal the whole aesthetic of the Matrix and then just cash in on it, it's just a cash grab kind of a thing. If you're gonna do that, can I recommend that you use the aesthetic that you are cashing in on? Could I recommend that the green filter of a dirty city be what you cash in on, as opposed to throwing all of that away as well? It's a cash grab, and you threw out everything that was Matrix, except for the scenes from the previous movies that you put into your fucking movie. The saturation of this fucking Matrix, of the new Matrix that Keanu is in and then has to break out to it. It's that Viacoming of MTV. It's the moment where MTV went from being art, it went from being music videos and having the people who make these music sit there and read you fucking poetry as advertisements. Between showing music videos and talking about music news, we'll have fucking Bruce Springsteen sit there and play a lick and read a poem that he wrote. That used to be MTV, and then at a certain point, Viacom came in with their money, and everything turned into reality TV, and the whole channel was cranked up on the saturation dial so that every green was fucking lime, and every blue was fucking teal, and every red was fucking pink, and it was just, That's what the Matrix looks like now. That's what the Matrix looks like now, because the people who made this movie made the Matrix look like that now. I don't really, I remember Matrix very fondly. I don't give a fuck what they do with the Matrix. This is just this is the worst fucking movie I've ever seen, because they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. They played another movie that they'd already made in the background, and then they had characters that they didn't develop, who didn't develop interpersonal relationships that I or any human being could actually care about, over the top of a set that nobody has any affinity for previously, even though this is a sequel, because they just threw all that shit out, and then didn't give us any reason to develop a new affinity to it, because they didn't even fucking show us the new city. The new Matrix looks like a Clorox bleach commercial that I just want to be out of it as quickly as possible. There is nothing in this film beyond Keanu Reeves' face, a lot, that is worth watching. They don't do anything. By the end of it, nothing has happened that you couldn't have taken a red pencil to on the script and say, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. There is nothing that is necessary in this film to exist except for Keanu Reeves' face, and they really should have just put out like 2.5 hours of Keanu Reeves smiling at a camera. None of it mattered. They had two characters at the very beginning who are like not Trinity. That's basically her role. She's the not Trinity. And then she's got like her controller, you know how in the Matrix they got a person who's on the ship and they're controlling, except for in this version of the Matrix, technology has evolved. They've gotten, so now they can like holographically project an image of the controller into the world while they're relating to somebody else, kind of a thing. Those two characters could have been at the center of this film and could have made a film that was worth watching. No Keanu, no Trinity, none of this rehashing of shit that we've already done. Take those two characters and do something with them. They did not. And simultaneously, it seems like they, as the writers, are trying to avoid the criticism of there's nothing new here by being so self-aware of the fact that we didn't put anything new here and we're making fun of it. It's like, Pootie Pie, that doesn't matter, you're still being racist. I mean, fucking mate, just because you say you're self-aware doesn't mean that you are self-aware, because if you were self-aware, you wouldn't have made this fucking movie this way. Do we need a live stream break yet? Can I have one? And then because this critically acclaimed landmark film, The Matrix, the first one, had a couple of criticisms about it, in that, you know, they were killing a lot of people, and they were killing a lot of people. In the Matrix, they were killing people. Fucking Morpheus says it out loud. Somebody says it out loud. I think it's Morpheus, that like these people are at any time a tool of the system that is imprisoning you, and you have to be willing to just fucking put them down. Fair enough that there were criticisms about that. In this movie, as a retort, now that we've had all of these years, as a response, no one dies. As far as I recall from seeing this movie once for the first and last time, no one dies. They replace everybody with bots, is what they're called in the movie, and say that a large population, part of the population is now bots because they're used to manipulate human beings into you know, which causes them to generate more electricity. And that's the thing, is like, I'm not even going to get into flaws of the science fiction universe that they are presenting, because from a structural making a movie level, it is such a failure that why would I get deep into how you fucked up this thing or that thing in the lore, and you know, why would I bother? They have 3 robots on their new ship. 3 robots! Count with me, friends. 1, 2, 3. 3 robots! 2 of them have a purpose. The third robot, okay, he's a little tiny thing, and they give him a name and introduce him as though, and this is so-and-so, and then he's like, he's this big, and so you're like, ah ha ha ha, that's gonna be important later. Here's his importance. There is a scene in which he, with his tiny fist bumps someone else. And that's it. Kind of sums up the whole new fucking movie, is that they introduce characters who have no meaning, who have no purpose, who they're not going to do anything with. Somebody in the fucking studio said, hey, man, we got Baby Yodas out there. We got that fucking tree thing from the Marvel Universe. We got to have like a tiny little thing. Maybe we got to, you know, we need at least 3 robots to produce in the robot pack when we sell the toys, right? So then the writers, okay, because you could just blame the corporation for you just blame the people in the studio, and that's fair enough. Fuck them, they deserve blame. But you know, writers take shitty studio notes and turn them into something if they're good writers. These writers, they take that third robot, little tiny robot, something, and that's the only scene that they fist bumps him. There is no reason for that character to exist. There is no real reason for these other 2 characters to exist except to be as a platform on which to introduce the idea that there are some robots who are cool with humans now. It's a horrible film. It's a horrible film because no one cared about character work. No one cared about the relationships that people formed together. I think back to the first one, and when we board the Nebuchadnezzar for the first time, when we walk onto the ship, we see all of these people, and we're waking up with Neo out of this fugue state, and we can see that they're all very like unique individuals who have their own realities and they have their own postures. You can see the weight of the world that's been upon them, and you can see in the way that they dress and in what they care about and what they don't care about. You start to imagine what it's like to live on this ship, and then you see them interact with each other, and you get a better idea of who's with who and what's with what. Not like this, not like this. In those two, you got the kid, the squirrely kid who like dies, and he's the first one to die to prove that the stakes are real. No one dies in this new movie. No one ever proves the stakes are real because the stakes are never real in this movie. He had relationships with all these people, and all these people had relationships with him, and it matters that he dies, and I feel that. None of that happens with any character in this movie. None of them ever die, but that's because none of them ever matter. If they would have killed one of them off, they would have had to make the effort to make one of them actually fucking matter. Because otherwise you would have noticed even more startlingly that you didn't care. You know, so long as we don't kill them off, no one dies, there are no stakes, then maybe the audience won't notice that they have no reason to give a fuck about any of these people in this story that we wrote for their entertainment and spent $200 million filming for their entertainment, and there's no reason for them to care about anyone. And that's what I think about the new Matrix movie, ladies and gentlemen. We did nothing to the James Webb Telescope. We're going to take a live stream break. In 1 hour and 2 minutes, I have acted more. I have put more character and personality and charisma and energy on screen than in 2.5 hours of $200 million worth of Warner Brothers money they bothered to put in the new Matrix film. I leave it to you to contradict me if it is possible.